Hey there, what's going on? So today I just finished Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, the quintessential classic gothic horror tale that has been readapted into numerous movies and transcended pop culture and media today for rightful reasons. It is a great story, beautifully written and thematically engaging, although at times I was personally not necessarily entranced in the story itself. I wasn't too attached to the characters, and it was sometimes hard for me to feel empathetic for the characters. And that's for a couple reasons, but overall it's a wonderful read, and it touches on, very compelling themes. Of course, namely one being science versus religion, and if it's in our duty or in our obligation to create, or if that's going against the will of God or whatever kind of spirituality one confines himself to. But I also felt that there were more nuanced themes as well. That's the theme I kind of knew was in the background going into this reading, but other themes that stood out to me were trauma and getting over your mistakes in life, or if you're going to let your mistakes and past misdeeds define you later in life, as well as trauma and then truth. Are you going to be honest with what you've done? Maybe if Frankenstein was more upfront with his loved ones about what he had done in his creation, in his obsessive science experiments, creating a being that he couldn't have thought have been so distasteful and horrid, he could have been more successful in defeating his monster and avoiding, I don't want to spoil what happens in the story, but avoiding some tumultuous situations from happening. So you have trauma, you have truth, and getting over, maybe your ego from preventing you from telling other people what's going on, or your fear and grief from preventing you from telling people what kind of help you need. And Frankenstein has kind of allowed this battle to only penetrate himself, and it's pretty much not disclosed this with anybody, not his best friends, not his loving and caring father. And he has so much love and care for his life, but it seems like nobody, or he thinks nobody, is really going to be able to handle the truth. And this is not a spoiler, but there is one point in the book where he tells a judge his entire situation of what happened to him and the experiments that led to the creation of this being. And the judge says that he'll do everything in his power to help him, but he doesn't know how successful he would be. And he has a good point, but I think that was an interesting scene showing, what if he did tell his family what was going on earlier, and maybe this could have been avoided. So that was a more nuanced theme I may have picked up on. It may not be Mary Shelley's intention, but that's what resonated with me. I also felt a theme of belonging and acceptance. That seems like a very big one, because if the monster himself had been accepted and had any community for love and expression that he didn't have to be an observer and an outsider, in the background of, maybe he would have been, or not maybe, more than likely he would have been peaceful and willing to confine himself to societal norms without being so violent and morose all the time, which he outright says in his narration that he is craving human connection and love, and he never had an outlet to support that, not even his own creator. And some fun, interesting things about Mary Shelley herself is that in creating this story, just by doing some research, she apparently was in a competition where she was only 18 years old, by the way, which is extremely impressive. But she was in this competition with her husband, Percy Shelley, and Lord Byron, where they each came up with ghost stories, I guess, to see who would come up with the best one. And Frankenstein is the result of Mary Shelley's contribution to that competition. I thought that was an interesting origin story of the book itself. And it seems like Mary Shelley took the Gothic themes of her book into real life, because apparently she kept the hardened heart of her husband, Percy Shelley, by her bed after he died. That's just the most Gothic thing to do for a Gothic author. So it seems like that was kind of her vibe as a person. Maybe she was very into anatomy and science and a gifted writer, and there's no doubt about it. I wanted to mention a couple quotes without spoiling any plot points. Just want to give an example of the very immersive imagery and personification of the landscape that is used often, where the character's emotions aren't directly described, but they're implied and even further suggested to the reader through the description of the environment and surroundings of whatever character is in question. So during this time of this quote, Victor Frankenstein is going through a really rough time and has undergone severe loss and trauma, and this is the description that Mary Shelley gives. The wind, which has fallen in the south, now rose with great violence in the west. The moon had reached her summit in the heavens and was beginning to descend. The clouds swept across it swifter than the flight of the vulture and dimmed her rays, while the lake reflected the scene of the busy heavens, rendered still busier by the restless waves that were beginning to rise. Suddenly a heavy storm of rain descended. So there's numerous instances of this very vivid and disturbing image of an evil and dreary environment being very heavily visualized to the reader. And it really puts you in Frankenstein's mindset, which was well done. Even though I personally, like I said in the beginning, had a tough time having empathy for the characters. I thought I wasn't too emotionally invested, but I did enjoy the very heavy description on environment and personifying inanimate objects and surroundings that people were in. And okay, another insightful and interesting quote that kind of allows you to peek into the monster's perspective was when they compared the monster's condition to that of a demon, a literal demon, or Satan himself. And what Mary Shelley says is, Satan had his companions, fellow devils, to admire and encourage him, but I am solitary and abhorred. It is gut-wrenching to read that. Somebody who's not only feels evil because of how society looks at him, but is completely and utterly alone. There's no one to share this experience with him at all, and that's why he seems to desire to have that companion who can at least share in suffering and pain what he's going to, if not rejoice and make something good out of it, but at the very least share that experience. And the fact that Satan, the epitome of evil, at least is in a way more happy than the monster, because he has a network or some kind of, according to the Bible or whatever, illusions, usually some kind of squadron of people that will fight for him, but the monster is just alone and he's yearning for that attachment. And it's really a story about emotions, and I think the power that they play in our lives as we do things that may not seem like they're related to our emotions. whether it's the experiments that Frankenstein engaged in the first place, his relationship with his father that keeps him going throughout a lot of the book, or his desire for Elizabeth, which ultimately caused a lot of issues with his family, or that was his desire with Elizabeth, which was very rocky because of his obsession with the monster and how our own obsessions can get in the way of those romances. There was a lot going on and a lot of characters, but it felt very concrete and it felt interwoven in a very interesting and poignant way. So overall, great read, and one that I'll definitely not forget anytime soon. Definitely a must-read for anybody who wants to get familiar with the classics, as I'm trying to do. And yeah, really have no complaints. Besides, I did lack some empathy, and I did feel as if his family was too perfect at times. I know maybe that fits well into the despair that the monster was causing him, that they were supposed to juxtapose his perfect potential life with the destruction that the monster is causing. But maybe that's why I didn't feel too much empathy. I felt that Frankenstein's family was too supportive and emotionally stable to be interesting and realistic in a way that engaged me. But overall, very interesting read. Highly recommend.